What's going on, guys? Tony here, and in this video we're going to talk about the unintended harmful consequence of a successful cancellation policy. So why are cancellations and no-shows so damaging to most healthcare practices, and especially to your physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech language I need a speech language pathologist, to your speech practice? The reason why is because so many of us are not prepared for the breakage. We don't take into account the cost of cancellations and no-shows. Instead, we want to penalize the client, which is totally counterintuitive to my brain as a business person, but I understand the frustration you have on the clinician side. So let's look at what most practices are doing, and let's re-examine this from a different perspective. So most practices have some sort of cancellation policy in place. You know, if a patient schedules an appointment, doesn't call to reschedule or cancel within 24-hour notice, typically it's some sort of fee. Maybe it's a $30, $50, $100 fee. Maybe it's the cost of the session. Nancy Beckley has some great resources and content out there talking about how you can create a compliant cancellation policy. If you're a hybrid, if you have some Medicare contracts, but then also are offering cash pay. So check out her website, Nancy Beckley. She does an amazing job. But my goal is to look beyond the surface, right? The surface is, well, I am a clinician. I reserve this time for you. If you don't utilize this session, the session goes, to waste. You can't put another patient in that spot. You can't fill that schedule. And now all of a sudden, a profitable day for you turns into a day of financial losses. And so, well, what are some other ways that we can examine this problem? Maybe it's not a problem with the client. What if, instead of penalizing the client, some of you were looking for, ways to reward the client for being compliant? So let's take a look at how we can resolve this issue without penalizing the client, without losing more in the future, more revenue, more possible referrals from this network, and maintain the goals, the outcomes that we ultimately want. So what are our two goals? We want to maintain or increase revenue, and we want to negate the harmful effect of non-productive time, right? Okay, so revenue first. That's an easy one. If we're looking at, let's take some average numbers. Let's say a normal outpatient clinic is experiencing a 10% cancellation no-show rate. I think that's pretty reasonable, depending on volume, depending on location, depending on niche. 10% isn't bad. If I schedule 10 patients, one of them has to cancel or no-show, I think that's reasonable. We hope it to be less. We don't want it to be more. So how do I do that? Well, simple. Just raise your rates. If you're doing a hybrid cash and in-network operation, take your cash rates, raise them by 10, 15, 20%, enough to offset the loss. So if I'm looking at $100 a day loss, then I need to raise my cash rates by enough so that I offset that loss. Option number one. Option number two, look at adding other streams of revenue. Now, I'm a big believer in a hybrid model, not just within like patient gets discharged from therapy and they start a continuity program, but even from the perspective of within a session. This change in patient care associated with the COVID virus, people are less eager to be touched. We're trying to maintain social distancing. So what we're seeing now is that maybe the manual therapy we thought was so vital isn't as vital as it used to be. And maybe those individuals who don't require manual therapy, it's not medically necessary, would benefit from it from a self-pay perspective. I can tell you that in my practice, I will struggle to get a patient to pay $25 in the form of a copay, coinsurance for therapeutic exercise, but I can blink an eye and patients will put $25 on the table for a 15-minute massage. So think about it from that perspective, that even within an individual session, you can operate a hybrid model where the massage is self-pay and the therapeutic exercise, therapeutic activity is a covered service. That being said, What else can we do to increase revenue? We can introduce product sales. We can look at digital products, selling home exercise programs, selling self-care courses. There's so many things that we have available to us that we don't take advantage of. On the flip side, that is a great segue into controlling non-productive time. Now, if you're the kind of clinic that's expecting your therapist to treat 3, 4, 5 patients an hour, don't expect them to be productive when they have a cancellation, because they won't even know it. They won't even realize that patient is in the clinic because the volume is so high. But if you're like the rest of us and you're running a clinic that's, maybe a therapist is working an 8 to 10 hour day, maybe they're seeing 8 to 10 patients in that day, that's a relatively low volume operation. If a patient cancels, no-shows, all of a sudden now that therapist has an hour of time, their creative juices are flowing, you can expect that therapist to take advantage of that by producing an asset that's going to produce long-term value. And what I mean by that is, when a therapist is treating a patient, they're pretty much only producing billable time for that acute episode, right? So if your charge rate's $150 an hour, the therapist is going to produce $150 for that hour. But if the therapist has a cancellation, no-show, that's an hour of creative time available, and that therapist puts that time into producing a digital piece of content, a YouTube video, a digital course, a home exercise program that could be sold. Now that product will produce revenue for a decade to come. Even if it's a $10, $15 product, if you're selling one a month, that's $120 a month. That already offsets the cost of that one visit, but now that same product could be sold for the next 10 years. That's $1,200 for 1 hour of time. But you have to understand, there's a certain culture, there's a certain mindset. You have to foster that within your clinical staff. I can't force certain clinicians to record YouTube videos. They're just not going to do it. But those clinicians might be more than willing to do other creative aspects. So you have to foster and build a team that's appropriate. But now you have a solution. Instead of threatening a cancellation fee, instead of punishing the patient for something that came up in their life, look in the other direction. Look to solve the real problems. The problems aren't the patient not coming. The problems are the loss in revenue and the loss in production. So find alternative ways to solve that problem. Don't blame the patient. Guys, if this kind of information was helpful, let me know. Post in the comments below. Also, tell me what's your favorite way to manage the harmful effects of lost revenue and lost production due to cancellations and no-shows. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing. You guys are so full of great ideas. Share them, post them in the YouTube comments, subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you on the next video.